On the surface of a barren, lifeless planet, the last of the Ikari watched the stars. Their once proud civilization had fallen to ruin. Long ago, they had been a mighty species, feared and respected across the galaxy. But now, they were nothing more than a scattered handful, abandoned and forgotten. The Ikari had known glory, but now all that was left was silence. Their great city had crumbled into dust. Their technology, once the pinnacle of advancement, lay broken and useless. The planet they once called home was a shadow of its former self, ravaged by years of neglect. Their last hope was a small, decaying base on the planet's surface. It was a refuge, but even it was on the brink of collapsing. For years, the Ikari had waited. They had sent out distress signals, but no one had answered. The galaxy, which had once called them allies, had turned its back on them. Their former allies, now distant and cold, had left them here to die. It wasn't just the lack of help that made their situation unbearably, was the sense of isolation. The Ikari had always been a proud species, but even their pride couldn't protect them from the crushing weight of solitude. Their last few survivors wandered the ruins, haunted by the ghosts of their past. Callan, one of the last Ikari leaders, stood on the edge of a crumbling tower. His eyes scanned the sky, searching for any sign of a ship, any signal that they weren't truly alone. But all he saw was the empty blackness of space, stretching out in every direction. The stars twinkled far above, as if mocking his desperation. "Where are they?" Callan muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper against the howling winds. Of the barren planet, he had been waiting for years, hoping for help, for a rescue that never came. But as time went on, he had started to believe it would never happen. No one cared about the Ikari anymore. They had been abandoned, just like so many other species before them. Kalon was not alone in his hopelessness. He could hear the faint sounds of his people in the distance, the soft murmur of those still alive, moving through the remains of their city. Most of them were older now, worn by the harsh life they had been forced to live. But some of them were still strong, still fighting for survival. And every day, Callan prayed that one of them would find a way to reach out, to send a message that might reach someone beyond their isolated world. Suddenly, a strange sound broke through the quiet. It was faint at first, like the static of a broken radio, but it grew louder, clearer. Callan's heart skipped a beat. He turned, listening intently. It was a signal. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard before. It wasn't the usual garbled distress call they had sent out in the past. This was different, clearer, almost ... deliberate. Callan's hands shook as he rushed toward the communications console. His breath was ragged as he activated the equipment. The signal continued, faint but steady. He couldn't believe it. Could it be someone else? Could it be a message from another world, a world that still cared about the Ikari? As he tuned the device, the signal became clearer. And then, just as he thought he might be imagining things, a voice broke through the static. "This is Earth. We've heard your call. You are not alone." Callan froze. The words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Earth, the humans. Could they really have heard their signal? Could they really be coming to help? For a moment, Callan couldn't move. His mind raced, his heart pounded in his chest. The thought that Earth of all places was reaching out to the Ikari was almost too much to believe. For so long, they had been forgotten, but now there was hope. But what kind of help could Earth offer? Could they really send a fleet across the stars to save the Ikari? Or was this just another empty promise, Another cruel trick to bring them false hope. Callan shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He had to be careful. This could be a trap, but the voice on the other end of the line sounded genuine, sincere. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. I hear you, Callan said, his voice trembling. Please, we need help. We've been abandoned. We've lost everything. There was a pause on the other end, and then the voice spoke again. We understand. Earth stands with you. You are not alone. Help is on the way. Callan could hardly believe what he was hearing. The promise of help felt surreal. Could this really be happening? After all these years of waiting and suffering, was it finally time for the Akari to have a chance at survival? But before Callan could respond, the signal abruptly cut off. The room fell silent, and for a moment he stood there, stunned and unsure of what to think. Had it really been Earth? Had they really sent a message? Or had his mind simply played a cruel trick on him? He looked around, at the dying base, at the ruins of his once great city. The Akari had lost so much. They had been abandoned by their allies, their empire crumbled, their technology fading. They had nothing left to lose. But then, in the depths of his heart, a spark of hope ignited. The Akari were not alone. Maybe, just maybe, Earth would answer their call. The silence in the room felt deafening. Callan stared at the communications console, his heart racing, but the static had stopped. His hands still trembled from the shock of hearing Earth's voice. He was alone in the room, but it felt as though the weight of the entire Akari race was pressing down on him. Was it real, or was it just a fleeting moment of hope that would vanish like all the others? For a long time, Callan didn't move. He had to be sure. He needed to hear that voice again. Slowly, he pressed a button on the console, activating the signal relay once more. The static returned, low and almost inaudible at first. But then, as if by some miracle, the words began to filter through the noise. This is Earth. Do you copy? Callan's breath caught in his throat. There it was, again the voice, unmistakable. This time, it wasn't a distant whisper, but a clear, steady tone. His mind raced. The message was from Earth, but why? Why would they respond? What did they want from the Akari? I copy, Callan replied, his voice shaky but firm. This is Callan of the Akari. Uriel, you are from Earth. There was a brief silence, then the voice answered, softer this time. Yes, Callan, we are from Earth. We have received your distress signal. We know you've been abandoned. We understand your suffering. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Callan could barely comprehend. After years of solitude, of believing they were forgotten, Earth had heard their cry. But Callan couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. Why now? Why had Earth waited until now to respond? And what did they expect from the Akari in return? The voice continued, we know you've lost everything, but you must trust us. Earth stands with you. Your fight is not over. But there are others who will not look kindly upon your survival. Prepare yourselves. Callan's mind raced again. The words prepare yourselves echoed in his head. But for what? What did Earth mean by that? And who were these others that might oppose the Akari survival? The Akari had no enemies left. They had been abandoned. Who could possibly threaten them now? Others? What others? Callan demanded, his voice rising in urgency. Who threatens us? What does this mean? The reply came, but it was not what Callan expected. There are forces in the galaxy who will not allow your species to rise again. But Earth will help you. For now, all we ask is that you stay hidden. Wait for further instructions. We will not let you face this alone." The message ended abruptly, leaving Callan with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. Message was clear. They were not alone anymore. Help was coming, but it wasn't just a rescue mission. It was the beginning of something far greater. Callan leaned against the console, trying to steady his breathing. His mind whirled. Could they truly be saved? And who were these new enemies Earth had spoken of? For the first time in years, Callan felt both hope and fear in equal measure. He left the communications room and walked out into the crumbling streets of the Ikari city. The sky was dimming as the planet's sun began to set, casting a reddish glow over the ruins. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and decay, and the distant cries of his people echoed through the empty streets. The Ikari had always been a proud species, but pride alone wouldn't save them now. They needed Earth, and they needed to be ready. Callan could feel it deep in his bones. Things were changing. He found the others gathered near what was left of their central plaza. A group of survivors, old and young, gathered round a fire. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Callan could see the hope in their eyes when he approached. They, too, had heard the signal. They knew something had changed. "We're not alone," Callan said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. "Earth has heard us. Help is coming." The group fell silent. Some of the older Ikari shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged cautious glances. "But what does that mean for us?" one of the younger Ikari asked. "Can we trust them?" Callan hesitated. The truth was, he didn't know. There were too many unknowns, too many dangers lurking in the darkness. But one thing was certain: Earth was their last hope. "We have to trust them," Callan said. "Earth believes in us, and we must believe in them, too." The group murmured in agreement, but there was still fear in their eyes. The Ikari had been betrayed before. How could they be sure this time would be different? As the fire flickered and cast long shadows across the ruined city, Callan turned his gaze toward the sky. The stars were distant, cold, and indifferent. But tonight they felt a little less lonely. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, Callan believed that the Ikari might yet have a future, and it would be shaped by Earth. But the question still lingered in his mind: who were these others Earth had warned about? And how far would the Ikari have to go to survive? The days that followed were filled with an unease that Callan could not shake. The message from Earth had ignited something deep inside him: hope, but it had also raised countless questions. Who were these enemies Earth had warned of? Why had Earth waited so long to reach out? Was it truly a rescue mission, or something far more dangerous? The Ikari had begun to prepare. They gathered what little was left of their technology, scrounging through the ruins of their once great cities, trying to salvage anything that might be useful. But as much as Callan tried to focus on the future, he could not escape the fear gnawing at him. What if Earth's promise was a trap? What if they had no intention of helping, but instead had their own agenda? He spent his nights pacing beneath the stars, replaying the conversation with Earth over and over in his mind. "Prepare yourselves," the voice had said. "Stay hidden." What did that even mean? Hidden from whom? From what? One evening, as the red sun dipped below the horizon, a faint light appeared in the sky. It wasn't a star, nor was it the familiar sight of one of the few remaining satellites that still orbited the planet. Callan's heart leapt in his chest. The light grew brighter, and soon it was clear it was a ship at first. It was small, just a pinprick of light on the edge of the atmosphere, but it grew quickly, cutting through the sky like a comet. Callan's eyes narrowed, and he felt a twinge of dread as the ship descended, casting a shadow over the planet's surface. This was the Earth ship, the one that had promised help, but as it drew closer, Callan's excitement was tempered by an unsettling feeling. There was something about the way it moved too swift, too purposeful. The ship was large, massive even, and it seemed to be descending too quickly. Was it landing or preparing for something else? The ship hovered above the planet for a long moment, its sleek, metallic hull gleaming against the darkening sky. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished behind the clouds. Callan stood frozen, watching the spot where it had disappeared. His pulse raced. Was this the help they had been promised, or was something far darker at play? It wasn't long before a call came through on the communications console. The same voice, calm and assured, echoed in Callan's ears. "We've arrived," the voice said. "Prepare to meet us." Callan's breath caught. The message was brief, but it was enough. Earth had arrived. He quickly gathered a small group of Akari leaders. They moved swiftly to a location near the landing site, a place where they could meet the Earth ship without attracting too much attention. The remnants of the Akari city were in ruins, and the chances of a peaceful encounter were slim. But Callan had no choice. If Earth was offering help, it was his duty to accept it, despite the fear gnawing at him. As they waited, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Callan's gaze shot up, and there, cutting through the mist, he saw it. The ship, immense, ominous, and powerful, descended slowly, as if it were a beast ready to claim its prey. It was far more than just a vessel. It was a symbol of power, of something beyond the Akari's understanding. The air was thick with anticipation as the ship's engines hummed, sending vibrations through the earth. Slowly, it touched down, its landing gear settling into the dust with a deep, resonating thud. The sound echoed through the ruins, a sound that sent a chill down Callan's spine. A hatch opened on the ship's side, and figures began to emerge. They wore dark, sleek armor that shimmered in the fading light. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and eerily silent. Callan's eyes narrowed as he watched them. These weren't just any soldiers, they were trained, disciplined, and there was a coldness about them that set them apart from any warriors he had ever encountered. The leader of the group stepped forward, his armor reflecting the dim light of the setting sun. He raised his head, his eyes hidden behind a dark visor. His voice, when it came, was steady and commanding. "We are Earth's chosen. We are here to help you," he said, his tone giving no room for doubt. "But there are forces coming. Forces you do not understand. You must prepare." Callan's heart skipped a beat. These were not the comforting words of an ally. There was something in the leader's voice that felt like a warning. The forces the Earth envoy spoke of were not enemies the Akari knew. But Callan couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was not just offering help. They were preparing for something far bigger, something more dangerous. "What do you mean?" Callan asked, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "What forces?" The leader did not immediately respond. Instead, he motioned for the Akari to follow him, and they were led into the belly of the massive ship. As Callan stepped inside, he felt the air grow colder. The walls of the ship were dark, almost metallic, and everything had a clinical, military feel to it. The ship felt like a fortress, not a rescue vehicle. "We'll explain everything inside," the leader said. But first, you need to understand there is no turning back from this. You've been abandoned once, but the galaxy has not forgotten you. There are enemies out there who will stop at nothing to ensure your extinction. Callan's mind raced. Was this the help he had been hoping for? Or was Earth dragging the Ikari into something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined? The interior of the Earth's ship was unlike anything Callan had ever seen. The metallic walls seemed to hum with energy, and the air was unnaturally still. There was no warmth here, only the cold, calculated silence of a warship ready for battle. It was clear now that Earth's intentions were far from the peaceful mission the Ikari had hoped for. Callan and the others were escorted down narrow, stark corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. The soldiers who had emerged from the ship moved silently beside them, their expressions unreadable beneath their dark visors. Callan felt a growing unease as they were led deeper into the ship. This was not a place for refugees, it was a place of war, a place built for the kind of survival that left no room for compassion. Finally, they reached a large, dimly lit chamber. A large holographic map of the galaxy flickered above a table in the center of the room, its image shifting and zooming in on various points. The Ikari leaders gathered around the table, their eyes wide with curiosity and suspicion. The Earth leader stood before them, his back straight, his presence commanding. "We brought you here for a reason," the leader said, his voice firm, his tone still laced with that same cold authority. "Earth didn't come to save you out of kindness. We are not your saviors, we are your allies. But even allies have their own agendas. The truth is, we need you." Callan exchanged a glance with the others, his mind racing. He had known something was off, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. Earth wasn't here to rescue them. It had its own motives, its own plans, and somehow the Ikari were caught in the middle. "What do you want from us?" Callan asked, his voice controlled, though his heart was pounding in his chest. The leader did not flinch. "Your species possesses knowledge, technology, and history that we cannot ignore. The Ikari have lived for millennia, and in that time, you have learned much about the galaxy's dangers that Earth is only just beginning to understand. We need that knowledge." The holographic map above the table shifted, showing clusters of star systems, some of which Callan had never seen before. The map zoomed in on a dark region of space, its edges jagged and pulsating with unnatural energy. "These, the Earth," leader continued, "are the rift zones, and they are a threat to all life in the galaxy. We believe they are the work of an ancient force, one that has been in hiding for centuries. The Ikari have faced this force before, am I wrong?" Callan's throat went dry. The rift zones were a legend among the Ikari, a story passed down through the generations, though few truly believed in it. They were said to be regions of space where time itself bent, where civilizations vanished without a trace, swallowed by an unknown power. And now, Earth was telling him that these rift zones were re-land more terrifyingly. They were spreading. "You're not wrong," Callan said quietly, the weight of the truth settling heavily on his shoulders. "We fought the rift before, but we were losing. We abandoned the war long before it could destroy us completely." The Earth leader nodded gravely. "Then you know better than anyone else what's at stake. The rift is awakening, and it is growing stronger. If we do not act now, the galaxy will fall into darkness. And when that happens, no one will be left to save you." Callan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The rift, A force older and more deadly than anything he could imagine was back. And Earth, with its power and might, needed the Ikari too, fight alongside them. But there was something else. The way the Earth leaders spoke was clear. They weren't just allies in this fight. There was an underlying tension, a sense of urgency that made Callan question what they weren't being told. What was Earth truly after? What were they willing to sacrifice to stop the rift? "We've been abandoned before," Callan said, his voice steady, though his mind was clouded with doubt. "How do we know that Earth isn't just using us for its own ends? You say we're allies, but what if you're only using us as pawns in your war?" The leader's gaze sharpened, and for the first time, Callan saw something flicker in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was something more unsettling. "Do you think we want to risk everything on a species we don't trust?" he said quietly. "The stakes are too high for that, but we don't have a choice. This is bigger than you, Callan. This is bigger than the Ikari." The words hung heavy in the air. Callan's mind raced, but he didn't respond immediately. The Earth leader was right. This wasn't just a battle for the Ikari. It was a battle for the galaxy itself. And if the rift zones were as dangerous as Earth claimed, they couldn't afford to waste time doubting each other. Still, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from him, some crucial piece of the puzzle. There was a reason Earth had reached out now after all these years. And whatever that reason was, the Ikari were caught in the middle of something far larger than they had ever imagined. The Earth leader stepped closer, his voice low but commanding. "We are not your enemies, Callan, but if you choose to stand with us, you will face dangers beyond your understanding. There will be no turning back. Are you ready for that?" Callan's mind churned with uncertainty, but deep within, the flicker of hope remained. Earth had come to help, despite their motives, and the Ikari had no choice but to stand beside them, more risk being wiped out by forces. They could not fight alone. Callan took a deep breath. "We're ready, we'll fight." The leader nodded, a rare moment of approval crossing his face. "Then we begin tomorrow. The battle for the galaxy starts now." The next few days aboard the Earth ship felt like a blur. Callan couldn't shake the unease that gripped him every time he saw the dark corridors of the warship or the soldiers moving in perfect, unsettling harmony. The Ikari had never been a race of warriors once. They had been diplomats, scientists, explorers, but now they were forced into a war they had not prepared for. Callan had gathered his people, as instructed by the Earth leaders. They had prepared. The last remnants of their technology, hidden deep within the ship's lower levels. The machines that had once been used to create, now prepared to destroy. There was no going back. Late one night, as the hum of the ship's engines thrummed in the background, Callan stood alone by the observation window, staring at the stars. The Ikari had always gazed at the night sky with wonder, but now it felt like a vast ocean of darkness, full of unknowns. The rift zones, once considered a myth, now loomed as a tangible threat. How long before they reached this far? Suddenly, a low chime echoed through the chamber, signaling a communication request. Callan straightened, his heart skipping a beat. It was rare for messages to come directly from Earth's leadership. With a cautious breath, he pressed a button on the console. The screen flickered to life, revealing the Earth leader. But this time, there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't the usual calculated coldness. It was something far more unsettling. There was fear. "We've received new information," the leader said, his voice strained. "Something ... has changed." We need to act immediately. The rift is not what we thought. It is ... alive. Callan's heart raced. Alive. The rift had always been a region of space, a dark anomaly, but never living, never conscious. What could he possibly mean by alive? The rift. It's not just a force, a phenomenon, the leader continued, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a living entity, and it has found us. Callan's mind reeled. A living entity. The implications were terrifying. The Akari had fought the rift before, but it had always been an abstract, a vast emptiness that swallowed everything in its path. Now it was a being, something with purpose, something that could think, plan, and maybe even act with intent. Explain. Callan demanded, his voice firmer than he felt. How is that possible? The rift, it's just an empty space, a tear in reality. It cannot be alive. The leader's expression darkened. We didn't know. We thought we were prepared for anything. But what we've discovered goes beyond anything we've ever faced. The rift is not just a phenomenon of space, it is the remnant of a civilization. An ancient, forgotten species that lived in the rift zones long before any of us. And now they are awakening, and they're coming. The words sent a shockwave through Callan's body. The rift was alive, and it wasn't just a passive force, it was a living being with its own agenda. It had a history, a civilization that had been lost to time, hidden within the very fabric of the rift. Callan stood in silence, struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. The Earth leader continued, his voice tinged with something close to desperation. They've been dormant, hidden within the rift for millennia, but now they're stirring. We've intercepted their transmissions, their signals. They're sending a message to Earth. Callan's breath hitched. The last thing the Akari needed was a message from the very force that had nearly destroyed them. He swallowed hard. What does it say? The leader hesitated, then spoke the words that sent a chill through Callan's spine. It says, you should not have interfered. Now you will know the cost of your arrogance. The screen flickered again, and the communication cut off. Callan stood in stunned silence, his mind struggling to process the gravity of the situation. The rift, a living force with a history, was no longer just a threat, it was an intelligence, a predator, hunting them. The ship's corridors seemed colder now, the walls pressing in on him. Callan's eyes flickered to the map of the galaxy on the wall of his room. The rift zones were growing closer. The galaxy that had once felt vast and full of possibilities now seemed small, closing in on him, suffocating him. But something else stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Fear, the kind of fear that didn't come from the unknown, but from the realization that the Akari were not just caught in a war for survival. They were up against an ancient, unknowable force that had no interest in mercy. Callan turned and walked out of his quarters, his footsteps echoing down the long, silent corridors. He had to find the others to share what he had learned. They had to be ready for what was coming as he moved through the ship. He passed soldiers preparing for battle, their faces grim but determined. They, too, felt the weight of what was ahead. But Earth had given them no choice. There was no turning back. The doors to the briefing room slid open, and Callan stepped inside, his face set in stone. The Akari leaders stood around a table, each looking up at him with expectation. "We have received a message," Callan said quietly, his voice low, from the rift itself. The room fell silent. "It's alive," Callan continued, his words heavy with the weight of truth, "and it's coming.